best part Ronald rat him to an island. In the wild and distant seas where he rolled his island balked the undeliverable, nameless perils of the whale these, with all the attending marvels of 1,000 Patagonian sights and sounds, helped dissuade me to my wish, for my mind was made up to sail in no other than an Nantucket craft, because there was a fine, boisterous something about everything connected with that famous old island, which amazingly pleased me. One complained of a bad cold in his head, upon which Jonah mixed him a pitch-like potion of gin and molasses, which he swore was a sovereign cure for all colds and catarrhs whatsoever, never mind of how long-standing, or whether caught off the coast of Labrador, or on the weather side of an ice island. The chaplain had not yet arrived, and there these silent islands of men and women sat steadfastly eyeing several marble tablets with black borders, fastened into the wall on either side the pulpit. Whether it was that this undulating tester rolled the savage away to far distant seas, I know not, but he now spoke of his native island and, eager to hear his history, I begged him to go on and tell it. Queequeg was a native of Rocavoco, an island far away to the west and south. Alone in his canoe, he paddled off to a distant strait, which he knew the ship must pass through when she put to the island. He at once resolved to accompany me to that island, ship aboard the same vessel, get into the same watch, the same boat, the same mess with me, and sure to share my every hap with both my hands and his, boldly dip into the potluck of both worlds. The people of this island of Rocavoco, it seems, at their wedding feasts express the fragrant water of young coconuts into a large stained calabash, like a punch boil, and this punch bowl always forms the great central ornament on the braided mat where the feast is held. Grace being said, for those people of their grace as well was we. The Queequeg told me that unlike us, who at such times look downwards to our platters, they, on the contrary, copying the ducks, glance upwards to the great giver of all feasts the grace. I say, being said, the high priest opens the banquet by the immemorial ceremony of the island that is, dipping his consecrated and consecrating fingers into the bowl before the blessed beverage circulates, seeing himself placed next to the priest, and noting the ceremony, and thinking himself of being captain of a sheep as having claimed precedence over a mere island king, especially in the king's own house, where the captain coolly proceeds to wash his hands in the punch boiling, taking it I suppose for a huge finger glass, Some games somewhat will tell you that they have to plant weeds there. They don't grow naturally, that they import candidate thistles that they have to send beyond seas for a spile to stop leaking an oil cask, that pieces of wood in Nantucket are carried about like bits of the true cross in Rome, that people there plant toadstools before their houses to get under the shade in summertime, that one blade of grass makes an oasis. 3 blades in a day's walk of prairie, that they wear quicksand shoes. Something like lapland or snowshoes, that they are so shut up, belted about, every way enclosed, surrounded, and made an utter island of by the ocean, that to their very chairs and tables small clams will sometimes be found adhering, as to the backs of sea turtles. Look now at the wondrous traditional story of how this island was settled by the red men, setting out in their canoes. After a perilous passage they discovered the island, and there they found an empty ivory casket, the poor little Indian skeleton, now biled at, like Bullock, and indeed many other Nantucketers, was a Quaker. The island having been originally settled by that sect, into this day its inhabitants in general retain in an uncommon measure the peculiarities of the Quaker, only variously and anomalously modified by things altogether alien and heterogeneous, so that there are instances among them of men who, named with scripture name as in a singularly common fashion on the Atlantean in childhood, naturally imbibing the stately dramatic, the invalid, the Quakeridium still, from the audacious, daring, and boundless adventure of their subsequent lives, strangely blend with these ungrown peculiarities, a thousand bold dashes of character, not unworthy a Scandinavian sea king, or a poetical pagan Roman, but unlike Captain Pulligan, who cared not a rush for what are called serious things, and indeed deemed those self-same serious things the veriest of all trifles. So Captain Bildet had not only been originally educated according to the strictest sect of Nantucket Quakerism, but all his subsequent ocean life, and the sight of many unclad, lovely island creatures, round the Horn, and all that had not moved this native-born Quaker one single jot, had not so much as altered one angle of his vest. I wonder, thought I, if this can possibly be a part of his Ramadan. Do they fast on their hams that way in this native island? I had seen a sailor who had visited that very island, and he told me that it was the custom, when a great battle had been gained there, to barbecue all the slain in the yard or garden of the victor, and then, one by one, they were placed in great wooden trenchers, and garnished round like a pillow, with breadfruit and coconuts and with some parsley in their mouths, were sent round with the victor's compliments to all his friends, just as though these presents were so many Christmas turkeys, at the period of our arrival at the island. The heaviest storage of the Pequod had been almost completed, comprising our beef, bread, water, fuel, and iron hoops and staves. If ye touch the islands, Mr. Flask, beware of foreign occasion. Why did Louis XVI of France, at his own personal expense, fit out whaling ships from Dunkirk, and politely invite to that town some score or two of families from our own island of Nantucket, for in their succorless empty-handedness, they, in the heathen sharked waters, and by the beaches of unrecorded Javelin Islands, battled with virgin wonders and terrors that Cook with all his marines and muskets would not willingly have dared. Next was Tashko, an unmixed Indian from Gayhead, the most westerly promontory of Martha's Vineyard, where there still exists the last remnant of the village of Redmen, which has long supplied the neighboring island of Nantucket with many of her most daring harpooneers. In like manner, the Greenland whalers sailing out of Hull or London put in at the Shetland Islands to receive the full complement of their crew. How it is, there is no telling, but islanders seem to make the best whalemen. They were nearly all islanders in the Pequod. Isolados too, are called such, not acknowledging the common continent of men, but each isolado living on a separate continent of his own. How could he forgive that in his island days, Queequeg, for one, must certainly have been guilty of some murderous, convivial indiscretions. The worthy Obed tells us that in the early times of the whale fishery, airships were regularly launched in pursuit of the game. The people of that island erected lofty spars along the seacoast, to which the lookouts ascended by means of nailed cleats, something as fowls go upstairs in a hen house. Long Island sailor. Thirdly, some 18 or 20 years ago, Commodore A. Commoden, commanding an American sloop of war of the first class, happened to be dining with a party of whaling captains on board a Nantucket ship in the harbor of Oahu. Sandwich Islands were this world an endless plain, and by sailing eastward we could forever reach new distances, and discover sights more sweet and strange than any Cyclades or islands of King Solomon. And there were promise in the voyage, if two strangers crossing the Pine Barrens in New York State, or the equally desolate Salisbury Plain in England of casually encountering each other in such inhospitable wilds. These Wade, for the life of them, cannot well avoid a mutual salutation and stopping for a moment to interchange the news and, perhaps, sitting down for a while and dressing in concert. Then, how much more natural that upon the illimitable pine barrens and Salisbury plains of the sea, two whaling vessels descrying each other at the ends of the earth and off lone Fanning's Island, or the faraway King's Mills, how much more natural, I say, that under such circumstances these ships should not only interchange hails, but come into still closer, more friendly and sociable contact, so much so, that now taking some alarm, the captain, making all sail, stood away for the nearest harbor among the islands, there to have us held about and prepared. It was not more than a day or two at the furthest after pointing her prow for her island haven, that the town-hose leak seemed again increasing, but only so as to require an hour or more at the pumps every day, the ship's company being reduced to but a handful. The captain called upon the islanders to assist him in the laborious business of heaving down the ship to stop the leak. After taking counsel with his officers, he anchored the ship as far offshore as possible, loaded and ran out his two cannon from the bow stacked as muskets on the poop and warning the islanders not to approach the ship at their peril. Took one man with him, and setting the sail of his best whale was steered straight before the wind for Tahiti, 500 miles distant, to procure a reinforcement to his crew. As soon as Steelkilt leaves me, I swear to beach this boat on yonder island, and remain there 6 days, where Steelkilt now is. Gentlemen, none know but upon the island of Nantucket, the widow of Radney still turns to the sea, which refuses to give up its dead still and dreams sees the awful white whale that destroyed him. But you must be a thorough whaleman to see these sights, and not only that, but if you wish to return to such a sight again, you must be sure and take the exact intersecting latitude and longitude of your first standpoint, else so chance-like are such observations of the hills, that your precise, previous standpoint would require a laborious rediscovery like the Salmon Islands, which still remain incognita, though once high raftsmen Dana trod them and old figure chronicled them, slowly wading through the meadows of bread. The Pequod still held on her way northeastward towards the island of Java, a gentle air impelling her keel. so that in the surrounding serenity her three tall tapering masts mildly waved in the languid breeze, as 3-mile palms on a plain, in a continuous line from the peninsula stretched the long islands of Sumatra, Java, Bali, and Timor, which, with many others, form a vast mole, or rampart, lengthwise connecting Asia with Australia, and dividing the long unbroken Indian Ocean from the thickly setting Oriental archipelagos. Those narrow straits of Sunday divide Sumatra from Java, and standing in the way in the vast rampart of islands, buttressed by that bold green promontory, known to seamen as Java, had they not a little correspond to the central gateway opening into some vast walled empire. Considering the inexhaustible wealth of spices, and silks, and jewels, and gold, and ivory, with which the 1,000 islands of that oriental sea are enriched, it seems a significant provision of nature, that such treasures, by the very formation of their land, should at least bear the appearance, however ineffectual, of being guarded from the all-grasping Western world. Unlike the Danes, these Orientals do not demand the obsequious homage of lowered topsails from the endless procession of ships before the wind, which for centuries past, by night and by day, have passed between the islands of Sumatra and Java, freighted with the costliest cargoes of the East, with a fair, fresh wind. The Pequod was now drawing nigh to these straits, Ahab purposing to pass through them into the Devon Sea, and thence, cruising northwards, over waters known to be frequented here and there by the sperm whale, sweep inshore by the Philippine Islands, and gain the far coast of Japan, in time for the Greek whaling season there, and so Starbuck found Ahab in the general chart of the Oriental archipelagos spread before him, another separate one representing the long eastern coasts of the Japanese islands united. Max may I, and so there was some heathenish, coffin-colored old lumber aboard, which, upon a long previous voyage, had been cut from the aboriginal groves of the Lackaday Islands, and from these dark planks the coffin was recommended to be made. Ah, poor fellow, he'll have to die now, ejaculated the Long Island sailor, and this tattooing had been the work of a departed prophet and seer of his island, who, by those hieroglyphic marks, had written out on his body a complete theory of the heavens and the earth. and a mystical treatise on the art of attaining truth, so that Quique in his own proper person was a riddle to unfold the wondrous work in one volume, but whose mysteries not even himself could read, though his own lived heart beat against them, and these mysteries were therefore destined in the end to moulder away with the living parchment whereon they were inscribed, and so be henceforth to the last. On the quarter-deck, the mates and harpooneers were dancing with the olive-hued girls who had eloped with them from the Polynesian Isles, while suspended in an ornamented boat, firmly secured aloft between the foremast and mainmast, 3 long island negroes, with glittering fiddle bows of white livery, were presiding over the hilarious jig. Not enough to speak of fat 2 islanders, that's all they but come aboard. Old Hardy, coming along. Those rocky islands the ship had passed were the resort of great numbers of seals, and some young seals that had lost their dams, or some dams that had lost their cubs, must have risen nigh the ship and kept company with her, crying and sobbing with their human sort of wail.
Okay, so we can start. Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this important discussion on small island developing states who are particularly vulnerable to the adverse impacts of climate change. We have the privilege to hear from leaders of countries facing the most extreme impacts of climate change. It is my honor to open today's event with His Excellency Mr. Ilham Aliyev, the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan. He has overseen a transformation. Because His Excellency has overseen an absolute amazing transformation of the economy in Azerbaijan. We've seen Azerbaijan expand its role in climate action and built stronger international partnerships, particularly through organizations such as the United Nations, the Non-Aligned Movement, and the Commonwealth, where Azerbaijan has championed sustainable economic growth and resilience. Your Excellency, I hand the floor to you.
Distinguished Secretary General, distinguished heads of states and governments, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I welcome all the participants of our summit. Since Azerbaijan became the host country of COPE29, our relationship with small island developing states elevated to a new high level. The voice of states must be heard on the global stage. I call on developed countries, especially with the colonial past, to provide tangible financial and technical support to small island states so that they can protect their countries from climate change implications. Climate change affects every country, including Azerbaijan. We see that year after year, the sea becomes more and more shallow. We see that there are less waters in our rivers, less snow in our mountains, and floods and heavy rains, which we never experienced in the past. Today, unfortunately, is a reality. So every country is affected, but for cities, it's existential threat. Azerbaijan is demonstrating its unwavering support to small island states. We have provided assistance to a number of disaster-prone countries in mitigating the impacts of hurricanes, earthquakes, and floods. We also supported water supply, food security, and restoration of cultural heritage projects. More than 10 small island states benefited from our educational grant program to study in universities in Azerbaijan. During our 4-year-long chairmanship in non-aligned movement, we provided financial and humanitarian assistance to more than 80 countries, including small island states, 20 of them. Addressing the challenges faced by those countries is at the center of Azerbaijan's efforts at COPE29. The leaders from Bahamas, Tonga, and Tuvalu visited Azerbaijan this May to discuss their vision of COP. The adopted Baku communique called for meaningful outcome of COPE29 and underscored the importance of accessible climate finance. Serious progress was achieved on making operational the Lost and Damaged Fund in Baku this September. Now the process must be completed to deliver finance to countries in need, in particular small island states. This summer in Tonga, Azerbaijan signed a joint declaration with Commonwealth. We are providing contribution of $10 million to support joint projects in Commonwealth's small island states. MOU with Commonwealth was also signed to use satellite data of the Space Agency of Azerbaijan as a cosmos for environmental monitoring and evaluation. Dear ladies and gentlemen, using this opportunity, I'd like to raise one of the important issues on the international agenda: neocolonialism and climate change. The so-called overseas territories of France and Netherlands, particularly in the Caribbean and Pacific, are among the most severely impacted by climate change. Rising sea level, extreme weather events, biodiversity loss create serious threats to these regions. The voices of these communities are often brutally suppressed by the regimes in their metropolis. The peoples of French colonies such as New Caledonia, French Polynesia, Mayotte, Wallis and Futuna, Corsica, Réunion, Guadeloupe, Martinique, French Guyana, Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, Saint-Martin, Saint-Barthélemy, and colonies of Netherlands such as Aruba, Curaçao, Saint Martin, Bonaire, Saint Eustatius, Salmon. Let's applaud the people of this. They are still suffering today in the 21st century from colonial rule. French Polynesia and New Caledonia are currently recognized as non-self-governing territories by the United Nations since 1946-1947. However, their decolonization process are still delayed. Between 1966 and 1996, French Polynesia faced serious environmental degradation due to 193 nuclear tests conducted by France. France is responsible for severe soil and water contamination and radiation there. Radiation level exceeded 4,900%. If we add here 17 nuclear tests conducted by France in Algeria during the years of occupation, we will see what damage this country made to the ecosystem of the planet. The list of France's crimes in their so-called overseas territories would not be complete if we do not mention the recent human rights violations by the regime. Regime of President Macron killed 13 and injured 169 people during these years' legitimate protests of Kanaks in New Caledonia. 1,700 people were arrested. During the protests in Martinique and Guadeloupe, also this year, 38 people were arrested. After all that, France was not denounced, neither by European Commission, nor by European Parliament, nor by Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. This is political hypocrisy. European Parliament and Parliament Assembly of the Council of Europe, these two institutions which became the symbols of political corruption, share responsibility with the government of President Macron for killings of innocent people. All political prisoners of France must be immediately liberated. But what else can we expect from European Parliament and Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe if chief European diplomat Joseph Borrell calls Europe a garden and the rest of the world jungles? If we are jungles, then stay away from us and don't interfere into our affairs. Azerbaijan supported small island states as the chair of non-aligned movement, supports as president of COPE29, and will continue to support our friends in the future. Thank you very much.
I now thank His Excellency, and we wish you and your team well for COP29. It's now my great pleasure to introduce my friend, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General. As UN Secretary General, climate action, sustainable development and peace building have been the central tenets of Antonio's leadership. Antonio, I welcome you to the podium.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, you have every right, you have every right to be angry, and I am too. You are on the sharp end of a colossal injustice, an injustice that sees the very future of your island threatened by rising seas, your people pounded by record hurricanes, your economies torn apart, and development gains left in tatters. This is an injustice perpetrated by the few. The G20 accounts for around 80% of global emissions, and it is an injustice that must end. Your nations, the small and developing states, are demonstrating what climate ambition looks like. You are the first responders, and the world must follow you, and it must support you. First, by sparing no effort to keep 1.5 degrees alive. That means global emissions falling 9% a year to 2030, and they are still rising. It means phasing out fossil fuels fast and fairly, and delivering on the COP28 outcome. And it means every country putting forward new economy-wide national climate action plans, or NDCs by COP30, that align with 1.5 degrees. The biggest emitters, the G20, must lead. And the United Nations is supporting countries to deliver through its Climate Promise initiative. Second, justice. You deserve support to deal with the crisis you have done next to nothing to create. And we must get serious about loss and damage. The amount initially pledged is equivalent to the combined annual salaries of the 10 most well-paid footballers in the world. As I said, we must be serious about loss and damage. We need significant contributions flowing to the loss and damage fund so it can have a meaningful impact, and namely a meaningful impact in cities that sometimes are devastated by climate change. And we also need a surge in funds for you to protect your people from climate impacts, which are growing in strength and frequency. Every one of you must have the chance to build resilience, and to seize the benefits of adaptation to drive progress across the Sustainable Development Goals. Developed countries must honor their commitment to double adaptation finance to at least $40 billion a year by next year, and this is an important step to closing the adaptation finance gap. But it will not be enough. These measures can take us only so far. Ultimately, we need more fundamental reform. And so, third, finance. Your nations have faced the perfect storm of suffocating debt, high capital costs, rising prices, and COVID-19, which paralyzed many of your economies. The result, scant funds for climate action or broader sustainable development. The Pact for the Future, adopted by consensus in September in the General Assembly of the United Nations, made significant strides forward. It calls for reform of international financial architecture, including effective debt relief. It commits countries to advancing an SDG stimulus of $500 billion a year. And it asks multilateral development banks to look at ways to improve access to concessional finance for developing countries and to consider structural vulnerability, including through using the multidimensional vulnerability index. A middle-income country can have much need, an enormous need of concessional funding because of its level of vulnerability, and this cannot be forgotten. It is essential, so, that vulnerable middle-income countries can access funds. And we must push for implementation of these commitments starting here and now. And we need a new climate finance goal in COPE29 that allows the mobilization of the trillions of dollars of finance developing countries need, with a significant increase in concessional public funds made now. That goal must provide clarity on how money will be mobilized, tap innovative sources such as levies on aviation, shipping, or fossil fuel extraction, and include an accessibility, transparency, and accountability framework to build confidence that funds will be delivered and available. And it must also include major capitalization boosts and reforms of multilateral development banks, including so they can leverage far more private finance at reasonable costs for the city's needs. I trust that we'll be fully supporting the presidency to make sure that we have a successful COP29 with an ambitious new goal, finance goal, that can be at the same time taking into account the particular situation of small island developing states. And this COP and beyond, I urge you, use your moral authority to demand action, demand leadership, and demand justice. Time is of essence. Together, you are helping us move from anger to action. And together, I know we can win, and I thank you.
I want us to take this opportunity to thank both President Aliyev and the Secretary General Guterres for their commitment and powerful leadership and their trenchant support. We hope we will deliver real action in this finance COP29. I think we should thank them. Of the Commonwealth's 56 member countries are small island developing states, 2/3 of the global whole. They have exceptional qualities and remarkable potential. Yet, in a world which is bound by a tangled knot of global economic, environmental, and security challenges, they face exceptional challenges. They are highly vulnerable to the intensification of climate change, which is compounded by limited fiscal space and global financial rules, which loads the dice against them, all of which compromises their resilience. That is why I have placed the priorities of our SIDS at the centre of the Commonwealth's programmes and at the heart of my advocacy across the international system. The SIDS4 conference in Antigua and Barbuda reaffirmed global recognition of the special attention SIDS need and deserve in our shared quest for sustainable development. The Antigua and Barbuda Agenda for Small Island Developing States, which emerged from the conference, laid the groundwork for addressing the challenges in face over the next decade, focusing on diversifying economies, building safe, healthy and prosperous societies, providing a secure future, and scaling up climate action and support, including climate finance. At Chogam in Samoa last month, Commonwealth heads of government voiced their support for that agenda and renewed the Commonwealth's principled and practical commitment to providing enhanced support for SIDS. This support takes many forms. It includes the active and energetic backing for initiatives being spearheaded by our member states, especially the Bridgetown initiative being led by my dear sister, Prime Minister Mia Mottley. This initiative complements the intention behind the Commonwealth's Universal Vulnerability Index, which assisted the development of the UN's multi-dimensional vulnerability index in order to increase understanding of genuine vulnerability in international institutions and improve the quality of decision-making. It also builds on long-established Commonwealth initiatives, such as our Meridian program, which now manages a combined total of more than $4 trillion in public debt across 50 countries. At the center of our climate change support structure is our Climate Finance Access Hub, which, with an initial support of just $8.5 million, has now unlocked more than $360 million, with an additional $500 million in the pipeline in vital resources for the Commonwealth's most vulnerable members. Using geospatial data and new technologies such as AI, we have increased the scale and speed of our analysis so as to create new, innovative, implementable solutions to erstwhile intractable problems. And I take this moment to thank President Aliyev for his commitment in helping us to use spatial data to get where we need to be. The hub was established. The hub was established in response to a dire need, because we all know that the current flows of climate finance are insufficient. And we know that despite contributing the least to climate change, our SIDS are grappling with a relentless assault from extreme weather, floods and temperatures causing widespread devastation. Here at COPE29, we must turn that tide. I am heartened by the Climate Finance Action Fund announced by the COP presidency. Our Climate Finance Access Hub stands ready as an established delivery mechanism to help the new fund unlock and distribute resources. I make this offer because our member states desperately need the climate finance promises which have been made to them through the Green Fund, through the Loss and Damage Fund, and so much more to be delivered. And because throughout my time as Secretary General, I have seen firsthand the difference that effective partnership can make. The challenges we face are real and serious. We can only overcome them by working together, pooling all of our commitment, all of our capacity, and all of our expertise, and all of our innovative spirit to turn the best ideas into action at scale. In achieving these goals, we must use the technologies available to us, including digital technologies for low carbon and climate resilient development, and the role of AI in accelerating climate action at scale and speed. And our most vulnerable nations cannot afford to wait any longer. Climate finance is not a luxury. It is a lifeline. It is, as Antonio said yesterday, not charity. It is justice. If it does not now flow, and flow soon, then for some, there may not be a future left to save. So this time, at this COP, there can be no gap between what we say and what we do. Solidarity has been a guiding principle of my tenure as Commonwealth Secretary General, and we will never shrink from the responsibility to stand shoulder to shoulder with our member states. So, as we work together to support AOSIS and fight for the highest levels of urgency and action on climate change, I offer the Commonwealth's hand in friendship and partnership, because together we can build a more resilient, sustainable, and just world. And we must. We now will move on to our first set of speakers today. In this finance COP, we look forward to increasing mitigation ambition in countries, updated national determined contributions, the NCDs, and enhance the adaptive capacity of SIDS to respond to climate change. Now, to facilitate this, while centering the needs and priorities of SIDS under the new climate finance goals, it is imperative to hold credibly each of us accountable. And I'm now going to invite His Excellency Mr. Mokhtar Babayev, the President of COPE29. Known for his environmental advocacy, my dear friend represents Azerbaijan's efforts to combat climate change through renewable energy, waste management, and sustainable development. Mr. Mokhtar Babayev, COP29 President, the floor is now yours.
Excellencies, distinguished leaders, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to welcome you all to the call to make progress on this critical topic. Special thanks to His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, for bringing us together at this significant meeting. We are grateful to our co-hosts, Samoa as chair of the Alliance for Small Island States, Grenada's chair of Caribbean Community, and Common Market, and Tonga as chair of the Pacific Island Forum, who have all helped us to make this event happen. Under the guidance and leadership of the President of Azerbaijan, His Excellency Mr. Ilham Aliyev, COPE29 presidency has been determined to make this an accessible conference that supports your participation and elevates your voices to the highest levels. We look forward to building true partnership during COP29 and beyond. Dear colleagues, over recent months, we have traveled extensively to listen and learn from you. From Antigua and Barbuda to Barbados and Tonga, these visits have deepened our understanding of the challenges you face. Our conversations have shaped the vision that we set out in our opening ceremony. They helped build on two pillars of the COP29 plan to enhance ambition and enable action. They reinforce the need for balanced outcome at COP29. This must include a fair and ambitious NCQG, deliver on all mandates and take forward the outcomes of the first global stocktake. On the NCQG, we have been clear that it needs to address the needs and priorities of developing states, with seeds and LDCs in the front now. We have also heard about the importance of detailed qualitative elements. To deliver on our top negotiating priority, we have repeatedly brought parties together to build agreement, and we have already seen progress on access futures. We will also continue to raise the importance of accessibility with the leaders of international financial institutions and multilateral development banks at COP29. Dear colleagues, it is essential to fix the imbalance in funding, as lack of support for adaptation leaves those of the front lines unprotected. Public funds will be essential to enabling ambitions. The COP29 has been determined to keep up the momentum on loss and damage. We already took historic steps to get the fund up and running and ready to deliver resources. We are also focused on enhancing coordination and coherence with the overall loss and damage landscape. And we worked hard to get the Santiago network ready to deliver technical assistance. Dear colleagues, we need comprehensive approaches to build resilience. National adaptation plans are essential tools to guide investment and action. Azerbaijan is aware to challenges of producing these plans as we submit our own. We have therefore called upon the Green Climate Fund to accelerate their support. Finally, we understand the importance of global mitigation efforts to avoid the worst effect of climate change. We are determined to take every opportunity to make progress towards the goals and ambitions that we set in the first global stocktake. Ladies and gentlemen, we all have a moral duty to support you. And we believe that if the multilateral climate process does not work for you, then it is not working. Small island states have shown remarkable leadership by setting ambitious targets despite limited resources. Now others must match this commitment. We stand ready to work with you throughout the COP29. We want to work together and move forward in solidarity for a green world. I thank you.
really want to thank my dear friend Mukta for that very warm introduction, but may I now invite the first panel to come and join us, please. Can I invite the Minister Cedric Schuster, the Minister for Natural Resources, Environment and Lands of Samoa, who is AOSIS's chair. May I also invite the President of the Maldives, together with the President of the Republic of Marshall Islands, my dear friend, the Prime Minister of Tonga, who is the Pacific Island Forum Chair, and last but by no means least, the Prime Minister of Grenada and Chair of the Caribbean Community, His Excellency Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell. I'm going to invite first my dear brother, the Honourable Cedric Schuster, who is the Minister of Natural Resources, Environment and Lands of Samoa and Chair of the Alliance of Small Island States. His leadership underscores the urgent need for climate justice and support for nations facing severe climate impacts. So over to you, Minister Schuster.
Thank you. The President of Azerbaijan, COPE29 President, heads of government, excellencies, delegates. I want to first thank the COP29 presidency for this initiative and particular attention given to SIDS and recognition of our unique challenges. Thank you for your warm hospitality shown to all our delegates here in Baku. Mr. President, the special needs and circumstances of SIDS were recognized at the Rio Conference in 1992 and were reaffirmed at the last SIDS conference in Antigua and Barbuda earlier this year in June. They are also reflected in Article 9 of the Paris Agreement, which recognizes our capacity constraints in accessing climate finance. The Antigua and Barbuda Agenda for Small Island Developing States is only the latest international agreement that operationalizes the special needs and circumstances of SIDS. Climate change is a phenomenon that is impacting all of us today. 2024 broke many worrisome records. We have seen many extreme weather events all around the world, from record-breaking heat globally. June and August 2024 were the hottest on record globally. July 2024 set the new record for the daily global average temperature. Hurricane Beryl was the first major storm of the 2024 Atlantic season and set multiple records. Extreme rainfalls caused catastrophic flooding and loss of lives in some parts of the world, while droughts are worsening in others. The winter maximum for Antarctic sea ice was the second lowest on record. As this normal is settling in, the very survival of our most vulnerable countries with the least responsibility in the climate crisis has ceased to be a distant prospect. The irreversible damage from climate change impacts are already being felt by SIDS. They must be addressed with a keen sense of urgency. For AOSIS, 1.5 is not just an abstract number. It has deep implications for the complete loss of our nations, our culture, and our identity. And relatedly, one of the main focuses of this COP, the new climate finance goal, or NCQG, must be set in a way that substantially supports all developing countries in their effective implementation of the Paris Agreement, its goals, and all those commitments contained under it. That said, SIDS and LDC, within that broader group of developing countries, were promised special accommodation in Article 9 of the Paris Agreement. AOSIS is here at this COP to see them operationalize. And for clarity, a simple references or recognition for SIDS and LDC special circumstances will not suffice. In the NCQG, there needs to be tailored and specific measures for both our groups for the scaled up provision of finance and enhanced access. One of those measures includes the adoption of a respective minimum allocation floors for SIDS of at least USD 39 billion per year, and for LDCs, at least 220 billion per year, within the provision goals of the NCQG. So no matter the overall number agreed at the quantum of the NCQG, SIDS require the agreement of these minimum allocation floors, as these minimum allocation floors represent a commitment to predictable and accessible climate finance for adaptation and loss and damage response in a financial system that is designed for us. Our small economies, limited resources, and our geographic remoteness must be fully addressed within NCQG design and implementation. Agreement to a goal that fails to recognize the special case of SIDS would contradict the Conventions and Paris Agreement provisions. Turning now to ambitions. As leaders, we need to show and sustain the political will required to act now. AOSIS commends the Troika leadership in advancing Mission 1.5 and urges continued and intensified efforts to accelerate the successful implementation of the first global stocktake outcome, including all the elements of the energy package. In Dubai, the UAE consensus reaffirmed that as a global community, we are not meeting our climate obligation. But the GST's outcome also provides a pathway to course correct by transitioning away from fossil fuel dependence, and outlines what energy transformations must happen in this decisive decade to keep the 1.5 target within reach. We are concerned about efforts to divorce this process from the best available science through the IPCC. The success of the Paris Agreement ambition mechanism established through the GST process is highly dependent on access to the latest science from the IPCC reports. We rely on the presidency to ensure that there is a clear message from this COP to the IPCC to accept the invitation from the GST1 outcome, ensure that their reporting cycle is aligned with the GST. AOSIS sees mitigation ambition as an integral part of the success of this COP, and pledges full support to the Azerbaijan presidency in reaching a meaningful mitigation outcome. The preparation, timely submission, and implementation of 1.5-degree aligned NDCs must be a key priority. Therefore, the discussions during the next 2 weeks must guide the formulation of a highly ambitious economy-wide NDCs that are Paris Agreement aligned. Translate the outcome of the GST into national targets and measures, and cover all greenhouse gases. Taking into account the IPCC's call for peaking global emissions by 2025, that is next year. Deep emission cuts must be our aim and our motto in developing our NDC. At COPE26, we were promised the doubling of adaptation financing. We were assured that our partners were working towards raising these funds. But since then, access to adaptation finance has remained challenging for us. As countries with the least capacity and resources to implement adaptation actions, we require grant-based financing to meet our urgent adaptation need. Therefore, careful consideration of how to operationalize the doubling of adaptation finance and integrating it into a new goal must also be part of agreement at this COP. The newly established Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage must come into play here. Small island states have advocated for a fund to address loss and damage for many years now. We must ensure the complementarity and coherence among all funding arrangements to address loss and damage as we strive to achieve 1.5 goal within this crucial decade. Now that we have agreed on a set of institutional arrangements for the fund, it is critical that it is fully operationalized, capitalized, and begins to disperse finance for loss and damage as quickly as possible. In conclusion, let me reaffirm our gratitude and full support to the presidency in delivering a successful mitigation and finance outcome that sustained the momentum from COP28 while setting up COP30 for success. I thank you all and welcome the Baku Declaration on amplifying SID's voice at COP29 for a resilient and sustainable future. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We look forward to Samoa and OASIS's leadership in getting a strong agreement here in Baku. I now turn to His Excellency, the President of Maldives, who brings such focused perspective on climate adaptation and environmental protection. Maldives is at the front line of climate vulnerability, and His Excellency has emphasized the need for resilient infrastructure, carbon reduction, and sustainable tourism. Mr. President, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon to you all. We are gathered here today, united as a family of small island nations with a voice that continues to rise above the waves of the oceans. We are gathered here not with distant predictions, but with the weight of the present reality. For us, climate change is not an abstraction. It is a force that erodes years of development gains, pulling us back to square one in mere minutes. The theme for this year's COP, in solidarity for a green world, demands more than solidarity. It demands transformation. For the Maldives, economic diversification is the way forward. We are transforming our economy by expanding port services and special economic zones and establishing our first development bank. We are transforming urban development by investing in a green eco-city, Prasmale, a lasting solution to our housing crisis and a hub for economic prosperity. Environment and climate resilient features will be put at the forefront. State-of-the-art and greener transportation and energy systems will fuel its economy. We are transforming our electricity production by investing in renewables. Our new energy policy and roadmap, with an estimated investment of over $1.5 billion, underscores our dedication to move towards a low-carbon economy. Excellencies, just a few months ago, we adopted the Antigua and Barbuda Agenda for Seeds, or the ABAS, the next 10 years plan that sets out our collective ambitions. But ambitions without finance are merely aspirations. The current financial architecture fails to meet our urgent needs. Therefore, I call for 3 immediate actions. First, the UN system, MDBs, and IFIs, and the private sector must unite in coordinated support for seeds. Forging partnerships can mitigate risks and make seeds more attractive for investments. Second, we need new innovative financial solutions. Our vulnerability is not captured through our measure of income. I propose debt forgiveness that is linked to climate resilience milestones. This would reward resilience efforts and redefine creditworthiness. We are spending more in debt repayment than towards climate action. We are facing high borrowing costs linked to conventional credit rating methodologies. A change is much needed. Third, COPE29 must deliver 2 crucial outcomes: a robust new collective quantified goal on climate finance that reflects our real needs. While we have now adopted the new operational standards under Article 6.4 of the Paris Agreement, we must conclude discussions on the international carbon market mechanism that learn from Kyoto's lessons and maintain environmental integrity. These carbon markets must be more than trading mechanisms. They must be bridges to technology transfer and sustainable development, especially for seeds. Excellencies, seeds being at the forefront of climate change have been advocating for climate action for decades. We are now at the 29th session of COP. We have heard lots of calls to action, lots of promises made. It is time now for us seeds to unite in solidarity and demand that words and promises be transformed into real, tangible action. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And we join you in your call for transformation and look forward to continuing to support Maldives, particularly through the Climate Finance Access Hub. I'll now turn to the Pacific and invite Her Excellency Hilda Henny, who is the first female president of the Marshall Islands and a global leader in the fight against climate change. She has been instrumental in advocating for the unique vulnerabilities of low-lying island nations, including championing ambitious climate goals and adaptation strategies. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Excellencies, Excellencies, friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you warm greetings of Yahweh from the Marshall Islands. Our atolls rise only a few meters above sea level, which makes climate change the most profound threat we face. Only urgent collective action can stop this profound threat from becoming overwhelming. Now is the time to drive that global action forward. Excellencies, the world is not on track to keep 1.5 alive. As the last COP before new nationally determined contributions are delivered, it is essential that this conference sets out clear expectations for the delivery of ambitious emission reduction commitments early next year. The global stocktake set the path. It is essential that all parties take all of the GST outcomes into account in setting their new NDCs. That includes specifying how they are implementing the commitments from Dubai, especially the transition away from fossil fuels. All major emitters must deliver NDCs that are economy-wide, cover all gases and sectors, and contain absolute reduction targets. These messages must be clear to the world. We strongly support the presidency in drafting a covered decision to make sure that they are. The Marshall Islands is also committed to helping land a high ambition outcome on the new collective quantified goal. We must find the trillions needed to address climate change, to drive the clean energy transition, to adapt to impacts, and to address the loss and damage we are already experiencing. The Marshall Islands launched our National Adaptation Plan at COP28. It sets out the blueprint for our culture and society to survive the climate impacts, including sea level rise, that are already inevitable. It charts a clear path forward, but it will cost billions to implement. 9 billion just to elevate 2 major urban centers, 35 billion for all of the hard infrastructure required to adapt to sea level rise. These are staggering numbers for a country our size. The new collective quantified goal must give us hope that we will secure them. That means a central focus on grant-based finance, particularly for adaptation and loss and damage. It means fully addressing the long-standing access challenges that cities face, including through a minimum allocation floor. And it means addressing the stark inequalities of our current financial system, including costs of capital and debt burdens that hold developing countries back from achieving their ambitious climate goals. Excellencies, we know that the sums required globally are in the trillions, but we also know that trillions have been found before. And recently, for example, in responding to the COVID crisis. And like the COVID response, we know that these investments are not just worthwhile, they are far more cost-effective than the alternative, an unlivable planet. We must all pull together, therefore, in the name of global solidarity, to deliver an ambitious new collective quantified goal. We can make our lives much easier if we are willing to stand up to the fossil fuel industry and make it clear that they will not get another cent in subsidies, and that any finance that supports them will never be counted towards the new goal. Excellencies, I have traveled far to be here. I have done so because I continue to believe that the Paris Agreement holds the key to my country's future and to our planet's survival. But SID's faith is wavering. Too many times, our voices have been pushed to the margins. We are therefore grateful to our hosts for convening this gathering. I urge you to continue to ensure our ministers and negotiators are centrally involved all the way through this conference. We are the ones on the front lines of climate change. We have developed global and local solutions. What remains is for the world to heed our leadership. Kumoltada, thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Your advocacy on environmental justice and climate resilience is an inspiration to us, but also to the young leaders who will be listening to us today, and we really thank you for that. We now turn to my dear brother, Prime Minister of Tonga and Chair of the Pacific Island Forum, who is a leader on climate finance and climate resilience and the need for stronger climate adaptation funding and more meaningful international partnerships to support small island states facing existential threats. And I welcome your statement, Honourable Prime Minister, from the big blue island state of Tonga.
President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, COPE29 President, Secretary General of the Commonwealth Secretariat, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, warm greetings from the Pacific, the Blue Continent. It is a pleasure to be here, and I want to express my deepest gratitude to the government and the people of Azerbaijan for their assistance and outstanding hospitality towards me, my team, and all its delegates who traveled here. I would also like to offer my heartfelt congratulations, Mr. President, on taking the helm of this global platform. Achieving consensus among representatives from over 190 countries is a difficult task, particularly when dealing with vital issues. The Pacific faces challenges that go beyond mere importance. They directly impact life and death. Mr. President, I had the pleasure of hosting you in my country, Tonga, during the margin of the 53rd Pacific Forum Leaders Meeting. It was an opportunity to showcase the realities we face as a small island developing state, and to highlight the urgent existential threat posed by climate change to our island nations. The severe and irreversible threats posed by climate change-related sea level rise will disproportionately impact the lives, the livelihoods, food security, ecosystem, and well-being of the people of the Blue Continent. As the UN Secretary General has so aptly stated, we are in the final countdown to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, and time is not on our side. To address this urgent crisis, we as Pacific small island developing states have taken decisive action. We have established key declarations. For example, the 2023 Declaration on the Continuity of Statehood and Protection of Persons amid sea level rise, and the 2021 Declaration on Preserving Maritime Zones against climate impacts. We have also developed and endorsed Pacific Regional Framework on Climate Mobility and introduced a framework for resilient development in the Pacific. The latter is the world's first regional framework linking climate change and disaster risk. I'm currently the chair of the Pacific Island Forum. a forum with 18 member countries, each with unique challenges and strengths. Our unity is essential in navigating the complexity of climate change and ensuring our collective interests are prioritized. This is particularly important as we discuss ambitious and meaningful climate action. We must move forward together in a way that benefits all our member states. Some of the small and developing states are absent from COPE29 as a protest against inaction on critical climate change action. Yes, we are frustrated, we are saddened. We can all sympathize as we have seen the disappointing outcomes of UNFCCC conferences in the past. However, we also understand without our presence, those with different views may shape outcomes that do not serve our interests. With the able leadership of COP29 presidency, we can unite and ensure that the outcomes of COP29 align with our priorities, including the new nationally determined contribution and the new collective quantified goal for climate finance, which must prioritize keeping the global temperature rise within 1.5 degrees Celsius. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of you, AOSIS family, for your passion and commitment, also shown by the many late nights you have endured and will continue to go through to ensure our interests are well served. I also want to thank COP29 presidency for organizing this summit. We are ready to provide support as needed to ensure the COP29 outcomes reflect our priorities. In conclusion, I commend the leadership of Antigua and Barbuda, leading to the new 10-year program of action for small island developing states, DIAPAS. Samoa as chair of AOSIS, Vanuatu as chair of Pacific SIDS, and Grenada for chair of the Caribbean Community for their unwavering commitment to small island developing states. Thank you once again, Mr. President, for this opportunity. We are ready to support your presidency and ensure that COP29 delivers a meaningful outcome for all. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Thank you for Tonga's leadership in climate action, particularly through hosting the Pacific Resilience Facility with a forward-looking target for securing $1.5 billion for a 1.5 degree future. It's a real testament to the urgency to act for SIDS, and we thank you for that leadership. I now turn, last but not least, to the Honourable Dickon Mitchell, the Prime Minister of Grenada and Chair of CARICOM. He has been a champion for regional solidarity, addressing climate change, economic development and disaster resilience, and his leadership and determination in building back after Hurricane Beryl is a testament to him and his country's resilience. And the floor is now yours, Prime Minister.
Thank you, President of Azerbaijan, COP President, UN Secretary General, Secretary General of the Commonwealth, distinguished heads of state and government, esteemed delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. First, I want to start by thanking the President, government, and people of Azerbaijan for the tremendous warmth, hospitality, and excellent arrangements made in supporting SIDS at this COP29. The support of Azerbaijan has ensured that many of the SIDS nations are here today. And we therefore put on record our sincere appreciation and gratitude for the support in making this COP accessible to SIDS. In US television shows, there are good cops and bad cops. From Sid's perspective, we want to ensure that this is a good cop. The reality is that the Caribbean community, CARICOM, which I chair currently, like our colleague Sid nations, are on the front line of this existential threat to our way of life. As I speak at this very moment, Grenada and many of the islands in the Southern Caribbean are dealing with the onslaught of massive flooding, which occurred overnight. In the case of Grenada, we have faced in 11 months a record 15-year drought, followed by a Category 5 hurricane, now followed by flooding, landslides, all in the midst of trying to continue with achieving our sustainable development goals. So when small island developing states speak of the challenge of financing the mitigation and adaptation that we face as a result of the climate crisis and the significant gap in financing that exists, it is easy to take this for granted. But the empirical data shows that SIDS have repaid in debt financing 18 times more than they have received in climate finance. Let me repeat that. SIDS have paid in debt repayments 18 times more than they have received in climate financing. And so without setting any new ambitions or targets, the starting point for credibility is to close that financing gap. And the debt we pay to be able to survive is a debt that is unsustainable, not only in financial terms, but in livelihoods, in lives, and the very civilization of the people who live in small island developing states. And so the partnership that has to be actualized is one that requires us to speak in ordinary language. The average citizen of SIDS don't care to hear about words like operationalize the loss and fund damage. They want to hear that the loss and damage fund has money in it, that the money is accessible, that the loss and damage fund is for SIDS, that it's located in a SIDS nation, that it's controlled by the SIDS nation, and that it is to be used for compensation for the actual loss and damage we suffer year in, year out. Not a loan, not a discretionary grant, but an obligation that has arisen as a result of the loss and damage we are suffering from the actions of others. And that is a partnership that SIDS seek, and that is the partnership that we are here at this good COPE29 to achieve. So I want to emphasize that SIDS are already doing all that they can do to build financial resilience. AOSIS are already pursuing a multi-layered financial resilience strategy to respond to the climatic challenge. We are paying for the parametric insurance. We are setting aside contingency funds. We are building savings into our national budgets. We have insisted on debt suspension clauses so that we can divert funds away from debt repayment and into emergency responses. But those measures on their own is simply not enough to allow SIDS to cope with the enormous challenge posed by the negative impacts of the climate crisis. So the partnership that we are seeking is a partnership that not only benefits SIDS, but in fact will benefit those who are responsible for this crisis. Because make no mistake, human beings will always seek a better life. And if the consequences of the climate challenge is the threat to our way of life, all people will move. They will seek a better life. And so the refugees that we have from man-made war and destruction will also become the refugees from the climate destruction. So we can find trillions to fight wars. We can find the trillions to solve the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for underscoring that SIDS pay back 18 times more than they borrow, and that this has to be changed, and we must find the money to support our members so that they can not only survive but thrive. Can we thank all the members of this panel, remarkable leaders on the front line, delivering for their members. We now turn to our third and last panel, and I'm going to invite all the panel to come, but we are very conscious that we are running short of time. So can I ask each of the following speakers as they come to the podium, please, to shorten your statements so we can have short, pithy statements which will get us back on track. Can I please invite His Excellency Philip Davis, the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, His Excellency Mark Brown, the Prime Minister of Cook Islands, His Excellency the Honourable Prasad, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance of Fiji, Her Excellency Dr. Carla Barnett, Secretary General of CARICOM, Her Excellency Mafalda Durati, the Executive Director of the Green Climate Fund, and His Excellency Ibrahim Sheikh Diong, who is the Executive Director of the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage. If they could all join us, I'd be very grateful. I'm glad that the first one to join us is my dear brother and friend, Philip Davis.
Thank you very much. Accepting the protocol that has been established, I start by pointing out I start by pointing out that our people do have the right to survival. They have a right to pass down to future generations a world better than the one they inherited. And yet, this most basic right, this right to life, to hope, to continuity, hangs by a thread. In this hour of crisis, it seems some would choose isolation over unity, self-interest over collective action. But we, the nations most at risk, do not have the luxury to retreat. The moment demands courage, vision, and a shared commitment to hold hands and confront together the fierce challenges that lie before us. The evidence is stark. This year alone, we have witnessed heat waves, droughts, floods, hurricanes, and fires. Each event a part of a global pattern. Yet still, there are those who look at these signs as if they are isolated moments, coincidences of bad weather, rather than the planet's unmistakable call for action. These are not mere coincidences of nature. They are warnings, the Earth's way of showing us the high cost of inaction. Every storm, every fire, every flood cries out that time is running out, and yet some choose to look the other way. The disasters are not the product of fate, but of choices. Colleagues, I ask you, as I ask myself, what kind of legacy do we wish to leave? Will it be one of solutions or of regret? The path forward is not complicated. It is simply inconvenient for some. The next round of nationally determined contributions in 2025 is a moment that cannot be wasted. Current commitments are insufficient to keep us within a 1.5 degrees Celsius future. They will instead lead us to a world well beyond 2 degrees Celsius, a world in which SIDS may no longer exist. Mitigation efforts in SIDS will not shift global emissions. They hold immense value, but they hold immense value for us. The implications for our economies, our people, and our ecosystems are severe. Hard-won development gains are being undermined as schools, hospitals, housing, roads, and bridges, much of which is constructed with significant multilateral loans, are destroyed before they are even fully paid for. The costs of these catastrophes are growing exponentially and diverting resources away from investment in long-term sustainable development. We are confronting the stark injustices of a crisis we did not create, a crisis we cannot avert on our own, even if we do everything we can to limit emissions. Most CARICOM member states lack the fiscal space to mobilize the resources needed to recover from worsening impacts of climate change. How can we close the recovery financing gap when a single hurricane can cause damage that amounts to multiples of GDP, as we have seen happen in our region? Access to concessional financing remains out of reach for many of our countries because of outdated eligibility rules based on GDP per capita. Even as we have reached agreement at the United Nations on a multi-dimensional vulnerability index, we have yet to see international financial institutions commit to its use. Grants for adaptation take too long to access and are insufficient to meet the scale of our climate-resilient development needs. We implore bilateral and multilateral partners to scale up resources for adaptation and loss and damage, and to ensure that SIDS can access these funds at scale, quickly, without excessive and costly bureaucracy, and in the form of grants. Justice demands this. It is unconscionable that small island developing states should bear the brunt of a crisis climate that we did not and are not contributing to. As I was reminded by my chairman of CARICOM, Prime Minister Mitchell of Grenada, SIDS have spent 18 times more in debt repayments than they have received in climate finance. The annual cost of damages from disasters is equal to an average of up to 8% of the entire GDP of SIDS, without considering the growing need for adaptation or the mounting toll of loss and damage. Justice demands that the polluter should pay, not those who bear the burden of the pollution. Adaptation funding must be prioritized. I will call for 70% of climate finance to be directed to adaptation for SIDS. This is not a request, but a necessity. Adaptation is our right to prepare and to protect. Furthermore, the Loss and Damage Fund must become a tool of immediate relief, not a maze of red tape. Bureaucratic delay is an injustice to every community left exposed and unprepared. We do not seek favors, we seek fairness. If we are to bear the consequences of a crisis we did not cause, then at the very least, we must have the support necessary to face it. Excellencies, this is our moment. We are faced with a choice: to act with boldness and unity, or to let fear and inertia decide our fate. Let us not be remembered as those who turned away in the hour of need, but as those who came together, who held hands across borders, and who fought for a world that honors the right to survival. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister Davis. We understand the pain which was inflicted on the Bahamas as a result of Hurricane Dorian. We commend you for your resilience and echo your call for justice, scale, speed, and equity for those who've suffered. I now turn to Prime Minister Mark Brown from the Cook Islands, who has championed the Pacific Partnership for Prosperity to support and deliver on the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent. And I invite you to make your statement.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I will take your instruction and try to make my comments reduced and pithy, I think was the word we used. I'd like to firstly acknowledge President Aliyev of Azerbaijan, our host country. Also acknowledge our COPE29 President Babayev for their generous support in allowing SIDS countries to participate fully at this COP meeting. Honourable leaders, kia ora to you all. At the COP26 in Glasgow, the parties committed to at least double adaptation finance from $19 billion per year by 2025. However, UNEP's latest adaptation gap report shows that while progress has been made, much of it is through non-concessional loans rather than grants or highly concessional financing. This is a critical issue for us, as the adaptation finance gap is estimated to be between around $40 billion annually for SIDS. Because of the scale and small size of SIDS economies, our costs are disproportionately high. SIDS need nearly double the financing of other developing nations as a percentage of their GDP. For SIDS like the Cook Islands, over 50% of climate finance needs are focused on adaptation. And let me be a bit clear, adaptation to us is protection, so we need money for protection. Meeting this demand is crucial, and we must ensure that the new collective quantified goals address these specific needs with an adjustable mechanism to reassess and increase the quantum as climate impacts escalate. This highlights the urgency for loss and damage mechanisms to be operationalized effectively.
We welcome the establishment of the Loss and Damage Fund, soon to be operationalized. However, this fund must be capitalized at a scale sufficient to meet our needs, with estimates suggesting that future needs may reach trillions. Ensuring an adequate level of funding is critical for addressing escalating climate-related losses. Given our high vulnerability and special circumstances, SIDS require a guaranteed minimum allocation from the Loss and Damage Fund, ideally in the range of 50%, to ensure our loss and damage needs are prioritized. In conclusion, we are here in beautiful Azerbaijan to set the scene for a longer-term goal at home. And our home is on the other side of the planet. But it's to set the goal for our people, our environment, that intergenerationally know that addressing climate change now builds the capital into the future for our resilience. And I look forward to amplifying our SIDS voice with and through the SIDS Declaration. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Brown, but also thank you for reinforcing the position of SIDS in the Pacific. And we now turn to Fiji, and we invite the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, the Honourable Professor Prasad, to make his intervention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary General, Excellencies, fellow ministers and fellow SIDS leaders. At the outset, I would like to thank the COPE29 presidency for convening this event and supporting the voices of SIDS. The voice of AOSIS and the experience of SIDS remains the backdrop of the narrative of ambition. We are the guardians of the 1.5 degree temperature goal, and indeed the establishing force behind the target. And while we may be on the front line of the climate crisis, the first to feel the burn and the most insignificant contributors to the climate emergency, our interests are far from rooted in pure self-interest. And our interests differ from many, as our interests constitute the only formulation of priorities and objectives that in reality benefit all. Interests that perpetuate uneven benefits as well as enable and permit direct damage to other parties as well as themselves cannot be translated into shared interests. Keeping global average temperature rise below 1.5 degrees is a shared and common objective, but across the parties, the drive to take responsibility for delivering it differs drastically. For over 2 decades, we have allowed incrementalism to subsume our agendas. This strategy, I'm afraid, has kept very specific industries cushioned, very specific power structures intact, but caused the world trillions in damage, wreaked havoc on the world's poorest, stripped much of the biodiversity from the face of the Earth planet, and locked in impacts that will threaten our stability for decades. The shadow cost of carbon is so great, the economic rationale so flawed, the short-termism so apparent, the effort to keep fossil fuels in play, despite a myriad of viable alternatives so overt, that it is very difficult not to see the rhetoric we are so used to hearing as a smokescreen. So SIDS must be clear. For the record, for the global majority, who have, whether they like it or not, put all their eggs in one basket. That we will not engage in a race to the bottom, especially if it is being twisted to be portrayed as a race to the top. The question we have before us now is, do we want more? Do we want to push our societies to the limits of the resilience in the hope of some sort of wizardry in 2030, or do we want real change? Contrary to the views of some SIDS, or contrary to the views of some, SIDS are not idealists. We are not idealists. We are realists. We are pragmatists. We ingest the science. We see the issues in their immediate form. And therefore, as SIDS, and I must say on behalf of Fiji, let me be very clear. COPE29 needs to raise the bar. Lock in the basis for Paris and 1.5 degree aligned 2025 NDCs, and secure the new collective codified goal on finance, which is evidence-based and recognizes our special circumstances. We need to ensure that all our partners are sighted on transformation rather than incrementalism, on hope rather than harm. Excellencies, this is our task. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Prime Minister, particularly in relation to the role I know you play as Finance Minister. And just to underline the importance between debt and our ability to deliver on adaptation and mitigation, it's right for us just to note that in the Commonwealth alone, our Meridian initiative currently manages $4.5 trillion of debt. And there is a direct correlation between that heavy burden of debt and that which has been occasioned by climate disasters. So we now turn to the agencies who have assisted us in delivering that change. And I turn first to Dr. Carla Barnett as Secretary General of CARICOM, who leads the regional effort on sustainable development, climate resilience and integration. As a regional stakeholder, I want to ask Secretary General Barnett what she believes the role of technology, particularly given the recent developments in AI, for enhanced climate action are. So over to you, Secretary General, my dear sister.
This one? Okay. Thank you very much, Secretary General, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. As we have been hearing, and I repeat for emphasis, SIDS, including CARICOM states and the wider Caribbean, are at the front lines of the climate change crisis. CARICOM states and all SIDS continue to bear the brunt of global climate change that we do not cause. Altogether, SIDS are responsible for less than 1% of global carbon emissions. SIDS' ongoing climate change challenges are unprecedented. Extreme heat, extreme weather, sea level rise, warming ocean temperatures are all creating a perfect storm that can reverse all our gains suddenly or progressively because of their cascading and compounding impacts. I have been asked to say a bit about what AI brings to this unprecedented set of crises. AI is rapidly being deployed to tackle the climate crisis on multiple fronts. It's enhancing our ability to predict and prepare for extreme weather events like hurricanes, wildfires by analyzing massive climate data sets. AI can help monitor and protect ecosystems by tracking things like shoreline change, loss of territory, and deforestation with unprecedented speed and accuracy. AI accelerates climate research by analyzing complex data, making timely analyses and policy development possible at levels previously unattainable. However, it is crucial to develop and use AI responsibly. We know the mischief that AI can be programmed to do. We have already been fighting misinformation and climate skepticism. A strategy to counter this climate misinformation may be timely. There are also emerging discussions of the carbon footprint and sustainability elements of AI and supercomputing that will need to be addressed. Within CARICOM, we have been developing our ICT for Development policy and program, including the creation of a regional AI policy to consider its role in sustainability and climate action. But the riddle that has to be solved with a much greater sense of urgency is the access to finance on affordable and appropriate terms to make it possible to do all we need to do to build resilience to climate change, including deployment of AI. What is true is that the longer the G20, who are responsible for 80% of global emissions, the longer they take to reduce these emissions that are at the core of the climate crisis, the larger the amount of funding necessary to address the impact of climate change on all of us. But especially SIDS, who, as I said, are responsible for less than 1% of emissions. And SIDS need real finance. We welcome the commitment made at COPE29 to double climate adaptation finance by 2025. But we have to underscore the importance of its materialization and operationalization. Same can be said for the Loss and Damage Fund. We urge that the board, together with the newly appointed ED, move swiftly to put in place the necessary arrangements to ensure the fund is fit for purpose for SIDS and can deploy resources as soon as 2025. Resources are urgently necessary, simply and directly in amounts commensurate with actual needs. We already know there's a significant finance gap for keeping global warming below 1.5. Further, SIDS receive only 2% of the global public finance, which is not even evenly spread across SIDS. The picture worsens when considering the debt of SIDS. According to the World Bank, over a third of SIDS have relatively high public debt ratios, with 14 being assessed as high risk for sovereign debt distress. Not only are we paying for the climate crisis, we are also committing future generations to debt because of lack of international support. So this COP must deliver a finance climate goal that is credible and consequential for 1.5. SIDS do not have the luxury of time. We must ensure that we solve the problem of access to resources to address our vulnerabilities. We cannot ease up on our insistence that those countries responsible for the emissions that cause climate change take effective action to reduce their emissions. And as we move ahead, we ask the UN system to evaluate the effectiveness of this process and whether it is delivering to those of us who are on the front lines. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barnett, and we now move seamlessly to those who are most able to assist us in terms of understanding how we get scale and speed when it comes to finance. Ms. Mafalda Durate is the Executive Director of the Green Climate Fund, where she leads efforts to mobilize and distribute climate finance to support developing nations in their climate mitigation and adaptation efforts. With changing times and increasing need for climate finance, how is the GCF gearing up to meet the increasing gap for climate finance, particularly bearing in mind what we've heard today, that SIDS are paying back 18 times more than they are being given for climate finance, and that they are currently drowning in debt. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Patricia. Let me start by thanking the authorities of Azerbaijan, COPE29 President, and the people of Azerbaijan for hosting this beautiful COP in this beautiful country. Thank you very much. I would also like to thank SIDS. You have been doing a service to us all, not just to your nations, by championing ambitious climate action. We know, and the science keeps telling us consistently, that the expected impacts will be worse than foreseen before. We know that last year GHG emissions increased by 1.3%, which is higher average than in the last decade. And this should be quite concerning to us all. Let me say that SIDS are a priority for the Green Climate Fund. Let me say, the way to demonstrate this is to say that as a total share of the resources that we have committed, around $16 billion, more than 10% have been committed to SIDS. That's 4 times more than other financial institutions. And Secretary General Carla just mentioned the number. On average, SIDS receive 2%. It's not just about quantum, it's also about quality. 65% of our financing to SIDS is grant-based. And we don't distinguish in terms of income level. The funding that we provide is based on the assessment of the needs. Of course, at a time we know that debt distress is an increasing concern. This is really important. Let me also say that we are working for the first time with many national and regional entities serving the interests of SIDS. Examples like the Development Bank of Jamaica or Fiji, the recently accredited Bank of Cook Islands, but also we are helping establish new entities like the Blue-Green Bank of Barbados. We have also been the largest providers of funding for strengthening institutions, strengthening NAPs, NDCs, or even developing them for the first time. We have provided more than 1/3 of our $600 million in the readiness program to SIDS. And also, speaking of debt, we have approved at our recent board meetings our first debt for climate swap project in Barbados, which we hope to be able to replicate elsewhere. Of course, this is all a drop in the ocean of needs. And this is also the reason why we have defined a vision of ambition of delivering $50 billion by 2030. Again, it's not just about quantum, it's about quality. So we've heard your call on simplification of access, and we are taking measures to reduce the times that it takes for projects to be approved and also for money to reach your countries and communities. One other word on complementarity and coherence. We have been proud to be part of the interim secretariat to establish the Loss and Damage Fund, jointly with UNFCCC and UNDP. We continue to support them, we will continue to support them, and very much look forward to joining hands with others, with the other funds and the MDBs and other IFIs in serving you in the way that you need, you deserve. It's unacceptable, and it should be unacceptable to us all what is happening in your countries. Thank you.
Can I take this opportunity on behalf of all of us to thank Mafalda for her trenchant work. I think all of us have felt the passion and the frustration, and just to reassure her that we are with her as we urge her to fly higher, further, and to gather more money. We now turn to our next speaker, who is, of course, Ibrahima Sheikh Diong, who is the Executive Director for the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage, and we await his words with joyful anticipation and no dread at all. Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Secretary General, for the teaser about the anticipation sense of urgency, which I've heard since I landed in Baku about the expectation from the fund that I have the privilege of being Executive Director. Let me begin by recognizing the tremendous efforts that the seed countries have undertaken for decades to make this fund a reality. And I'd like to pause for a second and give a big round of applause for the work they've done to bring us here. You've demonstrated what we can achieve in the name of global solidarity, consistency, but more importantly, dedication, and we are what we are thanks to your hard work. I want to recognize the leadership of the COPE29 presidency. You may have noticed today, over and over, the word FRD has been mentioned, and you made sure it is indeed on the table in all the conversations that we had, but also underscore the sense of urgency, because it's an area that affects the life of many people in the open world, in the city in particular. While we're making all this progress, unfortunately, extreme weather conditions are getting worse, not better, affecting the lives of millions of people in European countries, and seed included. And that itself should also determine why we need to underscore the importance of rapid response so we can bring the solutions that can actually improve the lives of many people who are affected by extreme weather conditions. It is also thanks to the leadership of Azerbaijan COP29 presidency, we began to get actually some new pledges made here in Baku. To address the question that many have raised in the past intervention, let me make 2 points. One is the commitment of the board in addressing your concerns, and then second, the commitment that I'm prepared to make here as Executive Director to be part of the solution. Number one, you know by now we have the pledge of $700 million, and as of yesterday we got about $720 million. We need to move swiftly in making sure we turn those pledges into actual funding, and that is an effort that needs to be done very quickly so we can have resources that we can begin to make the funding requires in the seeds in other countries as well. I think second, has been said by many people who spoke before me, the needs to address loss and damage is in the billions. Why we appreciate and the support we've provided so far in the billions that I just mentioned, in the millions. It is important that we need to capitalize the fund as quickly as possible in anticipation of the demand we've seen in all the developing countries, and I have no doubt under your leadership and your support and your advocacy will continue to make the case why the capitalization needs to happen and happen swiftly. Third, the board of the fund is extremely committed and making sure that we come up with the access modalities as quickly as possible and making access easy, nimble, and flexible and fair to make sure at least we can begin to address the needs of the countries we're supposed to be supporting. And that will take into account the lessons learned from previous funds, but more importantly, building on what Mafalda has said earlier, and complementarity and coordination, and make sure we can actually speed up access for the countries who actually need the funding. Forward, the fund also is acknowledging the importance of building actually ownership in our response in the countries we're supposed to support. So we're looking forward also in building the capacities to make sure the accessibility is easier. But more importantly, we're also looking at the ways in which in developing national loss and damage strategies and plan, whereby our intervention is fully aligned with the policies, the commitment, and the vision of the country we're supposed to support, so at least we can come up with sustainable solutions. Last but not least, the fund also recognizes we're not actually alone in addressing loss and damage. And that is why my colleague to my right, Mafalda, and I have decided to join forces to making sure, as we engage with countries, we pull our resources together so we can actually be part of the solutions. Let me finish by saying what I'm prepared to do as executive directors. I may be on the job only for 1 week, and that is probably too early to make any commitment or statement, but I can tell you this. I came from Senegal in West Africa. I grew up seeing women being challenged, like having access to water. I grew up seeing poverty in the countries where I came from. I am absolutely mindful that what we do has a human face, and everything that we do should begin about making a difference in the lives of people who are affected every single day by drought, tropical cyclone, and flood, and that's what motivates me as executive director, and making sure that we provide the support needed and to provide them swiftly so that we can be part of the solutions. Second, as executive director, I know for us to be successful, we have to be transparent, we have to be inclusive, we have to listen. And I'm prepared as executive director in listening to all the countries that are affected by climate change and making sure we can actually tailor-make those response in supporting the countries. Last but not least, our board and their leadership believe that the only way we can be successful by using at the bottom-up approach so that we can be part of the solution and be demand-driven and not supply-driven. And I hope by COPE30 in Brazil, the conversation that we'll be having together, it's not about just being 1 week on the job, it's about how much impact we've had so we can save the life and livelihood of many people who are depending on us to deliver. Thank you very much.
Will be willing you to succeed and will be walking with you in partnership. Excellencies, we are now drawing to a close, and I want to take this opportunity to thank all our speakers, but in addition, to thank the presidency in particular. From a Commonwealth point of view, we thank them for their MOU with the Commonwealth Secretariat, for the commitment they've made for $10 million towards the technical fund for SIDS within the Commonwealth, and also for the MOU with Cosmos for their satellite data to enable us to go further and to scale up the speed and nature of our climate finance claims. But we now come to an end, and we know, Excellencies, that we've heard the ambition for this COP
COPE29, which, as the Prime Minister of Grenada described it, needs to be a good COP and not a bad COP. And it's now my pleasure to introduce the man who will facilitate the delivery of our goals, Mr. Yalchin Rafiev, the COP29 Chief Negotiator. And I hand over to you, sir, to close today's discussions, but know you go with our love, our affection, our determination, that you will deliver everything that we have discussed today in a way that will be able to mark this COP as the COP which finally not only spoke but actually delivered action which was meaningful. And we thank you in advance for everything you will achieve on behalf of us all. Over to you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary General, and thank you for your and Commonwealth Secretariat's consistent support to COP29 presidency. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to thank you all for your active participation and the insightful conversations we had during today's deliberations. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to all the speakers and contributors today. We are delighted to have hosted this Leaders' Summit of the Small Island Developing States on climate change, along with Samoa, Chair of the Alliance of Small Island States, Grenada, Chair of the Caribbean Community, and Tonga, Chair of the Pacific Islands Forum. Small island states are at the front lines of the climate change. The island communities have been facing the disproportionate impacts of climate change while contributing less than 1% of the greenhouse gas emissions globally. We recognize that small islands are particularly vulnerable to climate change because of their unique circumstances, their remoteness, and high vulnerabilities. We are halfway through the critical decade of keeping the 1.5 degree alive, and this goal is extremely important for small island developing states. The IPCC has already warned that overshooting 1.5 degree will put more than 70% of the coral reefs at risk of severe degradation, including coral bleaching. SIDS are sometimes referred to as large ocean states, and their economy and livelihood are heavily dependent on the ocean. Climate change not only expedites the environmental destruction, but it also encroaches on the development gains enjoyed by SIDS, thereby hindering the speed with which they are able to meet the sustainable development goals. Furthermore, in order to deal with the climate change, we have heard loud and clear that SIDS need urgent adaptation interventions, which are costly and need concessional financing. In the context of constrained fiscal spaces, this sets back SIDS' aspirations for their development and their ability to strengthen resilience. And while they face several challenges to strengthen their resilience, climate impacts keep on increasing, and the SIDS are in the territory of having to address loss and damage at more frequent intervals. For us, it is imperative that as COP29 presidency, we do all we can to increase ambition and climate action to alleviate this impact. As you have heard today, climate finance is absolutely critical for SIDS' survival in this existential threat. We seek to reach a fair and ambitious outcome on the SEQG at COP29. Yesterday, the COP29 presidency hosted an event where new institutional documents of the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage were signed. These signings of institutional documents mark a historic milestone on the journey to providing funding for losses and damages to countries in need. At the same time, we also need to work on our collective capacities and identify and facilitate the exchange of technology to cope with the new realities. In line with the theme for this year's COP, In solidarity for a green world, we must stand together as a global community to ensure that 1.5 goal is achievable, and for this, collectively advocate for ambitious action that leaves no one behind. We hope that today's discussion on addressing critical adaptation and mitigation of loss and damage needs of seeds lead to constructive and collaborative efforts to collectively build seeds' future in the context of climate change. We commit to making sure that your priorities are at the heart of the work we are doing in these weeks and to support you all the way. Distinguished guests, I'm pleased to inform you that today Azerbaijan has a COPE29 presidency and the government of the independent state of Samoa, acting as the chair of the Alliance of Small Island States, adopt Baku Declaration on amplifying SID's voice at COP29 for a resilient and sustainable future as an outcome of this Leaders' Summit. The Baku Declaration contains a call to the international community to enhance support for SIDS countries in their efforts to tackle the adverse effects of the climate change. Dear colleagues, on behalf of the COP29 presidency, rest assured that you can continue to count on our full support throughout this process, every step of the way. This year's COP is not just about negotiations, it's about action. It is about enhancing our ambition and enabling real, tangible action. It is clear that only through collaboration and collective action can we overcome the immense challenges ahead. We must act with urgency and in solidarity to build a green, resilient and sustainable future. Thank you all once again for your participation.
Want to add my thanks to all the magnificent speakers, the leaders, particularly the COP presidency, for allowing us this opportunity to concentrate on the needs of our small island developing states who are right at the heart of the storm which has become the climate crisis, and to hope that each and every one of us will contribute to the partnership which will build the resilience and the funds that we will need to keep our world safe. And I thank everyone who has attended this absolutely critical panel today. Thank you.
Yeah.